Hey, so in the previous two videos, I kind of just covered the beginning start of how you're going to be able to maneuver around with the violin, kind of experiment. And in this one, I'm just going to explain like how you want to get started. How are you going to pick out a violin? How are you going to experiment with different ways or your playing style? So firstly, when you go out and get an instrument, you want to pick a violin or whichever instrument it is that case, viola, cello, bass. You want to pick one that you feel the most comfortable with. You want to kind of get to know the instrument before actually making a purchase. So that goes from anything. That can go from color, style, different chin rest positions. It could be higher, lower. It just has to fit your style. Some violins are brighter than others, some are more soft and mellow, so you really just want to pick out the best instrument that suits you. Aside from that, you also want to get the fingerboards that I mentioned previously, or not the fingerboards but the finger tapes. These are kind of like the tapes that go on the side or on the inside of the fingerboard, and these let you know where you want to put your fingers. I'll explain that in another video, but not in this one. Along with that, you want to pick out the right bow. Bows they range from different materials. This is made out of polished wood, but some of the cheaper beginner ones, those are mainly fiberglass or plastic. So you want to get a right bow hold. Depending on the era of the music, let's say, because if we're doing classical or modern music, you're going to want to have a more adjusted bow with your thumb underneath tucked in this little divot right here. Your pointer finger can exist anywhere along these. So you see where there's a padding here. You could put that here or maybe above, depending on where you have that rested. Your pinky will go on the tuner or the kind of the screw that tightens and loosens the overall bow. And these two fingers will rest right in the middle between these. And that, it adjusts. So if you're trying to do Baroque music, the bows back then were a lot shorter. These are quite long, but these are like more modern. They would play up here to get a faster sound as opposed to a full bow stroke. And when you want to start out, you want to have your bow line up. It's mainly just your wrist moving. Your arm doesn't move. A lot of beginners tend to want to move their arm. So let me demonstrate. It's all in the wrist. But if you're moving your arm like this, you're gonna get a messy, choppy sound. So what I advise against this, or what I learned, was have your shoulder up against a wall when you're just starting to play, and play like such, so that you get a smoother experience when you first start. Also, you'll see a lot of beginners, they'll come to the bow at an angle. So you see how this part, from here, the bridge, to the end of the fingerboard is where you play. A lot of beginners will play at a slant or at an angle. And you're supposed to play straight. The closer it is to the fingerboard, the smoother the sound or the quieter, but the closer you get to the bridge, the louder it is. So as opposed to, it's just a natural sound. And with the bow, you want to apply pressure. So let's say you're playing a soft piece. You just want to give it some give to it. You don't want to have you don't want to apply any pressure. To apply pressure, you want to use your index finger and press down a bit. So when you're doing that, you're giving a more robust and more noticeable sound. Before any beginners want to actually play any pieces, I'd recommend you practice only on your open string. So that means no fingers on this side. And if you're having if you have a comfortable position at where this is level, you can hold the violin without using your hand and make it feel comfortable. This isn't really like my taste. It doesn't really mold onto my shoulder as well as my previous ones, but I can still hold the violin just fine without use of any hands. So you want to just practice on your open strings, which is G, D, A, and E. You want to get the motion of the bow down, and you want to have that straight before you actually incorporate any of the fingers or anything complex like that. And along with your instrument, I would also advise, when you try to get your shoulder rest, you want to get one that molds to your shoulder the best. Just because it's an expensive shoulder rest doesn't mean it's necessarily better than a cheaper one. You want to, it really depends, because shoulder rests are designed to fit certain kinds of instruments. So like this, they all fit violins or whichever instrument that you're trying to get. But you see how this only, it doesn't protrude outside of the violin. It only stays within the back. Some go outside of it, so you have even more rest going over or beneath your shoulder. And that just depends on personal taste. I mean, I personally like the ones that go all the way around the shoulder. That gives me, you know, a more smooth playing experience as opposed to, you know, just something that is around here, just on the back side. And you also want to practice the posture of your hand. So a lot of beginners, they'll want to play at an angle that's like this, right? Where this part of their wrist touches this base right here. And that you do not want to do. You won't be able to play or shift all the way up like you're supposed to. Because when you're playing, you don't just stick to these. Oh, it went out. You don't want to just stick to the bass or the bottom of the violin. You want to be able to shift up and have higher notes. Because playing violin is essentially being fast and being able to play high-pitched notes. And that all comes with practice. You want to have your wrist at an angle so it comes in like this. And when you're shifting, this thumb is the guide finger. This thumb will always remain on the bottom of the fingerboard. And when you're doing that, you shift up with it. So if you're shifting, you go up to here. Excuse me. And you want to shift and be able to incorporate those high notes. Because if you're doing this, you're not going to get anywhere. There's no chance of doing that. And yeah, when you just get one, you want to experiment. Like right now, this is a new violin, so I have to tune it ever so often, or more than often, because it comes out of tune a lot. Also, when you're tuning, don't apply too much pressure. If you apply too much pressure, or if you bend it too fast, or anything like that, remember, these are all strings. They can pop. These are connected really with this bass, and that loops around to the top right here where you're maneuvering the screws up and down. And that basically tunes the instrument to standard tuning, unless you're doing fiddle tunes, which aren't really prominent in high school ensembles, but if you want to give it a try, you can always. But the standard tuning is always G, D, A, E, which my instrument is not in right now. But I'll cover more in a future video. As for now, just be able to remember personal style. You want to get down anything that you feel wary of. You want to be able to experiment with your hand, how you're going to use the bow, and really just your own personal taste with your instrument and your music.